Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. We've been reading through A Course in Miracles, and we're on the main text we've been reading, and we're on chapter 11, God or the Ego. This looks to be a rather long chapter, so I don't think I'm going to get through it in one sitting. So I'll break it up, and the rest of the chapter will be available the following Sunday. And then if you aren't aware, I'm also reading the daily lessons every day, and those are rolling out as well on a daily basis. And then the chapter readings roll out on Sundays. So here we go. This is chapter 11 in A Course in Miracles, main text, God or the Ego. This is the introduction. Either God or the ego is insane. If you will examine the evidence on both sides fairly, you will realize that this must be true. Neither God nor the ego proposes a partial thought system. Each is eternally consistent, but they are diametrically opposed in all respects, so that partial allegiance is impossible. Remember, too, that their results are as different as their foundations, and their fundamentally irreconcilable natures cannot be reconciled by vacillations between them. Nothing alive is fatherless, for life is creation. Therefore, your decision is always an answer to the question, who is my father? And you will be faithful to the father you choose. Yet, what would you say to someone who believed this question really involves conflict? If you made the ego, how can the ego have made you? The authority problem is still the only source of conflict, because the ego was made out of the wish of God's Son to father him. The ego, then, is nothing more than a delusional system in which you made your own father. Make no mistake about this. It sounds insane when it is stated with perfect honesty, but the ego never looks on what it does with perfect honesty. Yet that is its insane premise, which is carefully hidden in the dark cornerstone of its thought system. And either the ego, which you made, is your father, or the whole thought system will not stand. You make by projection, but God creates by extension. The cornerstone of God's creation is you, for his thought system is light. Remember the rays that are there unseen. The more you approach the center of his thought system, the clearer the light becomes. The closer you come to the ego's thought system, the darker and more obscure becomes the way. Yet even a little spark in your mind is enough to lighten it. Bring this light fearlessly with you and bravely hold it up to the foundation of the ego's thought system. Be willing to judge it with perfect honesty. Open the dark cornerstone of terror on which it rests and bring it out into the light. There you will see that it rested on meaninglessness, and that everything of which you have been afraid was based on nothing. My sibling, you are a part of God and part of me. And just for those of you who may have forgotten or gotten confused, this is Jesus speaking here. My sibling, you are a part of God and part of me. When you have at last looked at the ego's foundation without shrinking, you will also have looked upon ours. I come to you from our Father to offer you everything again. Do not refuse it in order to keep a dark cornerstone hidden, for its protection will not save you. I give you the lamp, and I will go with you. You will not take this journey alone. I will lead you to your true Father, who hath need of you, as I have, will you not answer the call of love with joy? Section 2 of Chapter 11, God or the Ego. Section 2 is the gifts of the fatherhood. You have learned your need of healing. Would you bring anything else to the sonship, recognizing your need of healing for yourself? For in this lies the beginning of the return to knowledge, the foundation on which God will build again the thought system you share with him. Not one stone you place upon it, but will be blessed by him, for you will be restoring the holy dwelling place of his Son, where he wills his Son to be and where he is. In whatever part of the mind of God's Son you restore this reality, you restore it to yourself. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother, for God himself will not be alone. Let me read that sentence again. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother, for God himself did not will to be alone. To be alone is to be separated from infinity. But how can this be if infinity has no end? No one can be beyond the limitlessness, because what has no limits must be everywhere. There are no beginnings and no endings in God, whose universe is himself. Can you exclude yourself from the universe or from God, who is the universe? I and my Father are one with you, for you are part of us. Do you really believe that part of God can be missing or lost to him? If you were not a part of God, his will would not be unified. Is this conceivable? Can part of his mind contain nothing? If your place in his mind cannot be filled by anyone except you, and your filling it was your creation, without you, there would be an empty place in God's mind. Extension cannot be blocked, and it has no voids. It continues forever, however much it is denied. Your denial of its reality may arrest it in time, but not in eternity. That is why your creations have not ceased to be extended, and why so much is waiting for your return. Waiting is possible only in time, but time has no meaning. You who made delay can leave time behind simply by recognizing that neither beginnings nor endings were created by the Eternal, who placed no limits on his creation or upon those who create like him. You do not know this simply because you have tried to limit what he created, and so you believe that all creation is limited. How then could you know your creations, having denied infinity? The laws of the universe do not permit contradiction. What holds for God holds for you. If you believe you are absent from God, you will believe that he is absent from you. Infinity is meaningless without you, and you are meaningless without God. There is no end to God and his Son, for we are the universe. God is not incomplete, and he is not childless. Because he did not will to be alone, he created a son like himself. Do not deny him his son, for your unwillingness to accept his fatherhood has denied you yours. See his creations as his son, for yours were created in honor of him. The universe of love does not stop because you do not see it, nor have your eyes closed lost the ability to see. Look upon the glory of his creation, and you will learn what God has kept for you. God has given you a place in his mind that is yours forever. Yet you can keep it only by giving it as was given you. Could you be alone there when it was given you because God did not will to be alone? God's mind cannot be lessened. It can only be increased, for everything he creates has the function of creating. Love does not limit, and what it creates is not limited. To give without limit is God's will for you, because only this can bring you the joy that is his and that he wills to share with you. Your love is as boundless as his, because it is his. Could any part of God be without his love? And could any part of his love be contained? God is your heritage because his one gift is himself. How can you expect like him if you would know his gift to you? Let me try that again. How can you give except like him if you would know his gift to you? Give then without limit and without end to learn how much he has given you. Your ability to accept him depends on your willingness to give as he gives. Your fatherhood and your Father are one. God wills to create, and your will is his. It follows then that you will to create, since your will follows from his. And being an extension of his will, yours must be the same. Yet what you will, you do not know. This is not strange when you realize that to deny is to not know. God's will is that you are his child. By denying this, you deny your own will and therefore do not know what it is. You must ask what God's will is in everything, because it is yours. You do not know what it is, but the Holy Spirit remembers it for you. Ask him, therefore, what God's will is for you, and he will tell you yours. It cannot be too often repeated that you do not know it. Whenever what the Holy Spirit tells you appears to be coercive, it is only because you have not recognized your own will. The projection of the ego makes it appear as if God's will is outside of yourself and therefore not yours. It is this interpretation. In this interpretation, it seems possible for God's will and yours to conflict. God then may seem to demand of you what you do not want to give, and thus deprive you of what you want. Would God, who wants only your will, be capable of this? Your will is his life, which he has given you. Even in time, you cannot live apart from him. Sleep is not death. What he created can sleep, but cannot die. Immortality is his will for his children, and his children's will for himself, or themselves. God's Son cannot will death for himself because his Father is life, and his Son is like him. Creation is your will because it is his. So in this case, we're speaking specifically of Jesus when we speak of God's Son. But you are God's child, whether you're a son or a daughter. So it applies to you as well. You cannot be happy unless you do what you will truly, and you cannot change this because it is immutable. It is immutable by God's will and yours, for otherwise his will would not be extended. You are afraid to know God's will because you believe it is not yours. This belief is your whole sickness and your whole fear. Every symptom of sickness and fear arises here because this is the belief that makes you want not to know. Believing this, you hide in darkness, denying that the light is in you. You are asked to trust the Holy Spirit only because he speaks for you. He is the voice for God, but never forget that God did not will to be alone. He shares his will with you. He does not thrust it upon you. Always remember that what he gives, he keeps, so that nothing he gives can contradict him. You who share his life must share it to know it, for sharing is knowing. Blessed are you who learn that to hear the will of your Father is to know your own. For it is your will to be like him, whose will it is that it be so. God's will is that his Son be one and united with him in his oneness. That is why healing is the beginning of the recognition that your will is his. And I want to read this one sentence again. For it is your will to be like him, those whose will it is that it be so. God's will is that his children be one and united with him in oneness. That is why healing is the beginning of the recognition that your will is his. And now we will move on to section 3, the invitation to healing. And again, we are in chapter 11, God or the Ego. The invitation to healing. If sickness is separation, the decision to heal and to be healed is the first step toward recognizing what you truly want. Every attack is a step away from this, and every healing brings it closer. The Son of God has both Father and Son because he is both Father and Son. To unite having and being is to unite your will with his, for he wills you himself. And you will yourself to him, because in your perfect understanding of him, you know that there is but one will. Yet when you attack any part of God and his kingdom, your understanding is not perfect, and what you really want is therefore lost to you. Healing thus becomes a lesson in understanding, and the more you practice it, the better teacher and learner you become. If you have denied truth, what better witness is there to reality? Let me try that again. If you have denied truth, what better witness to its reality could you have than those who have been healed by it? But be sure to count yourself among them, for in your willingness to join them is your healing accomplished. Every miracle that you accomplish speaks to you of the fatherhood of God. Every healing thought that you accept, either from your brother or in your own mind, teaches you that you are God's child. In every hurtful thought you hold, wherever you perceive it, lies the denial of God's fatherhood and of your sonship. And denial is as total as love. You cannot deny part of yourself because the rest will seem to be separate and therefore without meaning. And being without meaning to you, you will not understand it. To deny meaning is to fail to understand. You can heal only yourself, for God's Son needs healing. You need it because you do not understand yourself and therefore know not what you do. Having forgotten your will, you do not know what you really want. Healing is a sign that you want to make whole. And this willingness opens your ears to the voice of the Holy Spirit, whose message is wholeness. He will enable you to go far beyond the healing you would undertake, for beside your small willingness to make whole, he will lay his own complete will and make yours whole. What can the Son of God not accomplish with the fatherhood of God in him? And yet the invitation must come from you, for you have surely learned that whom you invite as your guest will abide with you. The Holy Spirit cannot speak to an unwelcoming host because he will not be heard. The external guest remains, but his voice grows faint in alien company. He needs your protection only because your care is a sign that you want him. Think like him ever so slightly, and the little spark becomes a blazing light that fills your mind so that he becomes your only guest. Whenever you ask the ego to enter, you lessen his welcome. He will remain, but you have aligned yourself against him. Whatever journey you choose to take, he will go along with you, waiting. You can safely trust his patience, for he cannot leave a part of God. Yet you need far more than patience. You will never rest until you know your function and fulfill it, for only in this can your will and your Father's be wholly joined. To have him is to be like him, and he has given himself to you. You who have God must be as God, for his function became yours with his gift. Invite this knowledge back into your mind and let nothing that obscures it enter. The guest whom God sent you will teach you how to do this if you but recognize the little spark and are willing to let it grow. Your willingness need not be perfect because he is. If you will merely offer him a little place, he will lighten it so much that you will gladly let it be increased. And by this increase, you will begin to remember creation. Would you be hostage to the ego or host to God? You will accept only whom you invite. You are free to determine who shall be your guest and how long he shall remain with you. Yet this is not real freedom, for it still depends on how you see it. The Holy Spirit is there, although he cannot help you without your invitation. And the ego is nothing, whether you invite it in or not. Real freedom depends on welcoming reality, and of your guests only the Holy Spirit is real. Know then who abides with you merely by recognizing what is already there, and do not be satisfied with imaginary comforters, for the comforter of God is in you. So now we are on section 4 of chapter 11, God or the ego, and section 4 is from darkness to light. When you are weary, remember you have hurt yourself. Your comforter will rest you, but you cannot. You do not know how, for if you did, you would have never grown weary. Unless you hurt yourself, you could never suffer in any way, for that is not God's will for his children. Pain is not of him, for he knows no attack, and his peace surrounds you silently. God is very quiet, for there is no conflict in him. Conflict is the root of all evil, for being blind, it does not see whom it attacks. Yet it always attacks the Son of God, and the Son of God is you. God's Son is in need of comfort, for he knows not what he does, believing his will is not his own. The kingdom is his, and yet he wanders homeless. At home in God, he is lonely, and amid all his brothers, he is friendless. Would God let this be real when he did not will to be alone himself? And if your will is his, it cannot be true of you, because it is not true of him. Oh, my child, if you knew what God wills for you, your joy would be complete. And what he wills has happened, for it was always true. When the light comes and you have said, God's will is mine, you will see such beauty that you will know it is not of you. Out of your joy, you will create beauty in his name, for your joy could no more be contained than his. The bleak little world will vanish into nothingness, and your heart will be so filled with joy that it will leap into heaven and into the presence of God. I cannot tell you what this will be like, for your heart is not ready. When I can tell you and remind you often, yet I can tell you and remind you often that what God wills for himself, he wills for you, and what he wills for you is yours. The way is not hard, but it is very different. Yours is the way of pain, of which God knows nothing. The way is hard indeed and very lonely. Fear and grief are your guests, and they go with you and abide with you on the way. But the dark journey is not the way of God's Son. Walk into the light and do not see the dark companions, for they are not fit companions for the Son of God, who was created of light and in light. The great light always shines, always surrounds you and shines out from you. How can you see the dark companions in a light such as this? If you see them, it is only because you are denying the light. But deny them instead, for the light is here and the way is clear. God hides nothing from his Son, even though his Son would hide himself. Yet the Son of God cannot hide his glory, for God wills him to be glorious and gave him the light that shines in him. You will never lose your way, for God leads you. When you wander, you but undertake a journey that is not real. The dark companions, the dark way, are all illusions. Turn toward the light, for the little spark in you is part of a light that is so great that it can sweep you out of all darkness forever. For your Father is your Creator, and you are like him. The children of light cannot abide in darkness, for darkness is not in them. Do not be deceived by the dark comforters, and never let them enter the mind of God's Son, for they have no place in his temple. When you are tempted to deny him, remember that there are no other gods to place before him, and accept his will for you in peace, for you cannot accept it otherwise. Only God's comforter can comfort you. In the quiet of his temple, he awaits to give you the peace that is yours. Give his peace, that you may enter the temple and find it waiting for you. But be holy in the presence of God, or you will not know that you are there. For what is unlike God cannot enter his mind, because it was not his thought, and therefore does not belong to him. And your mind must be as pure as his, if you would know that what belongs to you. Guard carefully his temple, for he himself dwells here and abides in peace. You cannot enter God's presence with the dark companions beside you, but you also cannot enter alone. All your brothers must enter with you, for until you have accepted them, you cannot enter. For you cannot understand wholeness unless you are whole, and no part of the Son can be excluded if he would know the wholeness of his Father. In your mind, you can accept the whole sonship and bless it with the light your Father gave you. When you will be worthy to dwell in the temple with him, then you will be worthy to dwell in the temple with him, because it is your will not to be alone. God blessed his Son forever. If you will bless him in time, you will be in eternity. Time cannot separate you from God if you use it on behalf of the eternal. I think I will read one more section and then we'll pause this chapter. So this is chapter 11, God or the Ego, and section 5, the inheritance of God's Son. Never forget that the sonship is your salvation, for the sonship is yourself. As God's creation, it is yours, and belonging to you, it is his. Yourself does not need salvation, but your mind needs to learn what salvation is. You are not saved from anything, but you are saved for glory. Glory is your inheritance, given you by your Creator that you might extend it. Yet, if you hate part of yourself, all your understanding is lost, because you are looking on what God created as yourself without love. And since what he created is part of him, you are denying him his place at his own altar. I wanted to highlight that, and I did, although not the way I wanted, but, and let's just read that again. Yet if you hate part of yourself, all your understanding is lost, because you are looking on what God created as yourself without love. And since what he created is a part of him, you are denying him his place in his own altar. This is extremely powerful and meaningful message right here. And as some of you that follow my teachings know, I talk about this issue all the time. When we are not loving ourselves, we are cutting ourselves off from creation and from God. And this is a perfect way of saying it. I'm going to read it one more time to stress it. Yet if you hate part of yourself, all your understanding is lost, because you are looking on what God created as yourself without love. And since what he created is a part of him, you are denying him his place in his own altar. Could you try to make God homeless and know that you are at home? Can the Son deny the Father without believing that the Father has denied him? God's laws hold only for your protection, and they never hold in vain. What you experience when you deny your Father is still for your protection, for the power of your will cannot be lessened without the intervention of God against it, and any limitation on your power is not the will of God. Therefore, look only to the power that God gave to save you, remembering that it is yours because it is his, and join with your brothers in his peace. Your peace lies in its limitless. Limit the peace you share, and yourself must be unknown to you. Every altar to God is part of you, because the light he created is one with him. Could you cut off a brother from the light that is yours? You would not do so if you believed that if you realized that you can darken only your own mind. As you bring him back, so will you return. That is the law of God for the protection of the wholeness of his Son. Only you can deprive yourself of anything. Do not oppose this realization, for it is truly the beginning of the dawn of light. Remember also that the denial of this simple fact takes many forms, and these you must learn to recognize and to oppose steadfastly without exception. This is a critical step in the reawakening. The beginning phases of this reversal are often quite painful, for as blame is withdrawn from without, there is a strong tendency to harbor it within. It is difficult at first to realize that this is exactly the same thing, for there is no distinction between within and without. If your brothers are part of you, and you blame them for your deprivation, you are blaming yourself. And you cannot blame yourself without blaming them. This is why blame must be undone, not seen elsewhere. Lay it to yourself, and you cannot know yourself, for only the ego blames at all. Self-blame is therefore ego identification, and as much an ego defense as blaming others. You cannot enter God's presence if you attack him and attack his Son. When his Son lifts his voice in praise of his Creator, you will hear the voice for his Father. Yet the Creator cannot be praised without his Son, for their glory is shared, and they are glorified together. Christ is at God's altar, waiting to welcome his Son. But come wholly without condemnation, for otherwise you will believe that the door is barred and you cannot enter. The door is not barred, and it is impossible that you cannot enter the place where God would have you be. But love yourself with the love of Christ, for so does your Father love you. You can refuse to enter, but you cannot bar the door that Christ holds open. Come unto me, who hold it open for you, for while I live, it cannot be shut, and I live forever. God is my life and yours, and nothing is denied by God to his Son. At God's altar, Christ waits for the restoration of himself in you. God knows his Son as wholly blameless as himself, and he is approached through the appreciation of his Son. Christ waits for your acceptance of him as yourself and of his wholeness as yours. For Christ is the Son of God, who lives in his Creator and shines with his glory. Christ is the extension of love and of the loveliness of God, as perfect as his Creator and at peace with him. Blessed the Son. Blessed is the Son of God, whose radiance is of his Father, and whose glory he wills to share as his Father shares it with him. There is no condemnation in the Son, for there is no condemnation in the Father. Sharing the perfect love of the Father, the Son must share what belongs to him, for otherwise he will not know the Father or the Son. Peace be unto you who rest in God, and in whom the Son, the whole sonship rests. So we will pause this chapter here and save the last 4 sections, sections 6 through 9, for next Sunday's reading. And I hope you really can spend some time with the idea that when you are not being loving with yourself, you are rejecting God. Because it really is the key to understanding what's happening here and to finding your peace and wholeness, which is what I am here to help with. So I will see you again next Sunday for the remainder of this chapter. And then, as you know, I'm sure, the daily lessons are rolling out every day. And I will see you there tomorrow if you choose to join me for the daily lessons as well. Thank you again. You are beautiful. You are whole. You are God in action, in form, divinity in action. And I see you. And I'm here to help you see you as well. Namaste.